What is a secret that you will never tell anyone? One Christmas I was 9 years old and knew that Santa wasn't real, but for my 7-year-old brother the fantasy was very much alive and good. We shared a room and my brother woke up on Christmas morning and looked confused that Santa had not eaten the Kit Kat that had been left out. He went quiet and I could see that he was working the facts through in his head. When he wasn't looking, I ate the Kit Kat and showed him the wrapper and claimed he imagined seeing the wrapper unopened. This was 26 years ago and I have not told him in case he works out Santa is not real. Reminds me of my younger brother and I. Think we were 8 and 4. One year we got a note from Santa. We were very excited and I read the letter out loud to my bro. I don't know what possessed my parents to write this note, but Santa had thanked us for being especially good children that year, and to please thank our parents on his behalf because he had ran out of cello top and had to borrow some of ours. My brother was so happy and ran off to tell our parents all about it, but I stayed in his room, staring at that note, wondering how the fuck Santa would run out of cello top if all presents were wrapped at the North Pole by the elves. And then it clicked and I was pissed, but I didn't tell my brother because I didn't want to ruin his day. About a week before I graduated high school, my family had a massive house fire. We lived out in the country, and no one was home, so by the time anyone noticed it was on fire it was way too far gone. 30 feet flames above the roof. We lost everything, but had insurance and no one got hurt. Anyways, I was in a chemistry class at the time that around 70% of the grade centered around a lab notebook that was graded all at once at the end of the semester. You would do labs every week, and then do lab write-ups in the notebook. I had been slacking off and was way behind on the assignment and would have had to pull a few all-nighters just to turn something in. The day after the fire I went into class and told my teacher that the notebook had went up in the fire and that I had no idea how I would ever turn the assignment in. He was extremely nice about it, told me not to worry and gave me 100% on the whole assignment. Just said that I had bigger things to worry about and was about to graduate and that he hoped my family was doing okay. Well, the notebook was in my car the whole time. Threw that bitch away and swore myself to secrecy. All hail the chemistry teachers. I missed the class where we did our coursework practical that went towards our final grade. Teacher told me to come after school one day to do it. I was shit at chemistry. I showed up, sat down, and waited for him to come back to the classroom with the equipment so I could set up and start. Instead, he walks in with a piece of paper. He drops it on my desk, tells me not to get 100. And goes back out the room. Dude had given me the fucking answer score. I made myself get a 90 to get in the highest grade bracket and ended up with a B overall. Thanks Dr. Bingham, you're a real one. When I was in high school, a friend confided in me that they had problems with cutting. Showed me recent marks. We had a long talk. I went to the counselor of the school and told them a couple days later. I was a teen. I struggled with the choice, but ultimately the fear of losing my friend won. Long story short, they ended up in a mental facility for a month and came back, absolutely baffled as to who routed him out. Decided it was probably a different friend. Well, I married him. He still doesn't know. I found out years later who ratted on me that I had my dad's prescription painkillers and that I planned to kill myself. I was super mad at first, cause I was hurt they never came forward about it, but then I realized why they wouldn't have when it happened. I was in high school, and while we had grown apart, I was really glad he told me cause it was what started my road to recovery from suicidal thoughts. Kyle, thanks for being a snitch friend. I appreciate you. About 20 years ago I worked for a big publisher. They were upgrading all their tech and just dumping it in a skip. I asked a security guy if I could take some stuff from the skip and he said to help myself as it was all going to get crushed anyway. During a night shift I filled up my car with the beige G3/Quadra Apple Macs, keyboards, mice and some 19.4 Mac screens. Some of the Macs had Quark Express and Photoshop on them. I cleaned them up and sold the lot. I made enough to buy a G4 Quicksilver of my own which I still have today. I didn't tell my coworkers, ex-wife, managers or anyone else. Same. My company shut down in 2015 and I was kept to help it close up. We had these massive production lines with Mitsubishi robots that all went to a warehouse somewhere. Everything else went to a Catholic school auction, but most was trashed. Each robot had a little module for reporting data back to the PLC or main computer, about the size of a deck of cards. We had mountains of them and knew they were $900, $2,000 and always in short supply. That is why we stocked so many of them. Many went in the trash because nobody left knew what they were. So every day one would go home with me and my papers in its original packaging. Just one a day for about a month. The rest were trash because they had no value at the school auction and weren't needed with the original robots. I waited about a year and a half to make sure the company was good and dead. Then I unloaded them on eBay and to some spare parts sellers I had relationships with. I sold them slowly. I think I made about $20,000 pulling those out of the trash. I was in high school. I had problems talking to people. I was the shy kid. I found out my cousin went to the same school, and I saw that he was on the same boat. He was a lot more social, and a lot more funny, but he just didn't click with people, just me. We became best friends, had a blast at lunch every day. One day a girl invited to go eat sushi, and I was stoked. I had plans with my cousin, tradition you may say, and just bailed on him. I was like, yo, this really cute girl asked me to eat sushi with her, and although he was upset, he was like, cool, have fun. Well, when it was time to go eat, I went with the girl and some people told her they were gonna go eat at X place, but they only had room for one more in their car. The girl without hesitating said yes, and just got in and left me. I was scared to walk through the hallways, scared to run into my cousin. I didn't have the gut to tell him what just happened. I passed by the library and saw him there, sitting alone, passing time. Broke my heart. I left him. Never again. Brothers before everything. My mom left me to be homeless while still in high school to move out of state with an abusive, to me, new husband. When I finally got back in touch with them 3 years later, they gifted me one of his prized possessions. A car. It was kind of an olive branch. Problem was, as a barely 20-year-old with a minimum wage job living in DC, I couldn't afford to plate it, inspect it, insurance, gas or taxes on it, nothing. Still full of hatred for this man and therefore somewhat out of spite, I sold it to a coworker friend whose big family desperately needed it for probably 10% of what it was worth. Told my stepdad and mother that I got in an accident and it cost $400 to tow and my insurance only covered blah blah. It's been 11 years. Throw away because there's no chance of me ever saying this in person. As a kid I grew up in a small country community of 3,000 people, where I went to school etc. I had a crush on a girl who was 2 years older than me all the way through high school, and when I was 16 I found out she was my half-sister as my dad had cheated on my mom. This only came out when she turned 18 and found out who her dad was. Prior to that no one knew and my dad and her mom had kept it a secret for 18 years. Completely fucked with me for quite a while that I'd had a crush on my half-sister for a number of years. As a teen I stayed the night at my best friend's house and slept in their guest room. I was woken about 2 a.m. to the sound of her older brother arriving home intoxicated from a party. He saw me in the guest room and leaned against the doorway to say hi. He then stumbled down the hallway to his bedroom but never turned the hallway light off, and it made it difficult for me to get back to sleep. So after about 10 to 15 minutes I got up and walked down the end of the hallway to the light switch. I turned it off, and started walking back to my room when I briefly glanced into his bedroom as I walked past. His door was wide open and he was sitting at his computer with his back facing me. He was naked from the waist down, masturbating to what looked like transgender porn. Can't be certain, but it looked like someone in heavy makeup, long hair and with a penis. I must have made a noise because he swung around, saw me staring and said oh shit. Then I immediately and swiftly returned to bed and lay in the dark, not able to get the image out of my mind. This is not that good. I spent most Saturdays with my grandma and we would watch the same VHS of Moonstruck every week. I never told her how much I hated that movie. It's a good movie but not when you're 8. We would watch it and then after we would eat ice cream and put on SNL, Opera Man era. I would give anything to watch Moonstruck again with my grandma. Edit. Thank you for sharing all these great memories. It's hard to look back and really get a sense of what was lost that long ago and to know that we are all reeling in the years. Hopefully some of us can be our grandparents to a new generation, although Cher will never act again and SNL will never have this again. I loved my grandma so much and 15 years later I just wish I could see her again. That I wish she could be the great grandma now and just hand me a tissue so my eyes weren't watering. She always had a tissue in her pocket or sleeve. Grandma ball or move. I used to work in the shopping center. One time as I was walking into the building I sneezed and totally shit myself. I was about 10 steps away from the shop so I had to think fast. I took a hard left turn and walked direct into a department store. I only had $5 on me so I beelined for the underpants section and got the cheapest pair I could find. I then had to go to the center toilets and sort everything out. It was a real mess. I texted my boss and told them I was stuck in traffic but in reality I was 100 meters away trying to salvage any shred of dignity I could for the next 20 minutes. I'm happy to say the mission was a success and that day is now the benchmark by which all other days are measured. Every day since has been infinitely better. I ended up telling this story to my mother 15 years later but it kind of counts. This happened when I was 6. When I was a little kid my paternal grandmother had 2 dogs, Tessa a little ditzy Maltese and Bindy a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Tessa was too stupid to even realize being mean was an option so we always played with her when we visited my grandmother. But Bindy was always locked away in half of the house. When asked about her my mother would bristle and say Bindy doesn't like kids. My mother had her reasons to be very fearful of dogs like Bindy as she had to put down her first dogs when I was born because they were seriously aggressive towards me. Like launch themselves at the window if they saw me aggressive. The house operated under an airlock system for the first year and a half of my life. Always 2 doors between me and the dogs. After a while my grandmother moved into the house directly behind ours and we put a gate between our shared fence. Suddenly Bindy was accessible. We kept a respectful and fearful distance from her, for the most part. One day I was in my garden playing with my very patient Labrador KD. We were playing circus. This dog was amazing. There wasn't a single thing you could do to him to make him mad, except be a horse. He hated horses. Bindy wandered into the yard and was watching us so in a burst of foolishness I ran towards her to try and involve her in the game. She panicked and bit me. Not hard. I didn't bleed or anything. I had some indents on my arm from her teeth and it did bruise a little but even now I'm always covered in bruises. I panicked and cried and sulked in my cubby house until I calmed down enough to go inside. I knew I couldn't tell my mother because I would get in so much trouble for playing with Bindy. The next day I was in the garden with KD and Bindy was there also but I ignored her. I studiously ignored her for weeks. She'd come up and I'd walk away. Then some switch flicked. She was my adoring dog now. Everywhere I went she followed after me and doted after me. We'd curl up on the sofa together and I couldn't go a single step without her at my side. I think she must have felt so guilty about that bite. She was my sweet dog and we were best friends for 4 more years until she passed. My parents always remarked on this miraculous change in attitude from Bindy. How an old ornery dog who hated everyone was suddenly an oversized lapdog. Even years after she passed they'd marvel about it. I didn't tell my mother until I was well into my 20s that the reason Bindy liked me was because she bit me. Probably 15 years ago my sister had a gerbil and one day I decided to bring it out of her cage and surprise her in the living room with it. Somehow I slipped on carpet and the gerbil went flying headfirst into the wall. It basically sounded like I threw a golf ball at the wall and the gerbil wasn't moving. Naturally I put it back in its cage and removed myself from the vicinity. To my amazement the damn thing was still alive and moving around a few minutes later and lived another 2 years without anyone ever knowing that I basically co-baited into the wall at full speed. My youngest sister, First grader once accidentally sat on and killed her dwarf hamster, S'mores. I don't remember all the details on how it happened, but it was very unintentional. The next day, another sister, fourth grader, sends a video to the family. She had set her phone on the couch, walked across the room, started running at the camera, jumped and spun so she landed butt first on the camera. She edited the video so the jump and ass first landing were in slow motion. She captioned it "Pov, S'mores last moments, heartless but hilarious." My dad was single and a couple of my friends' moms was always bringing us food. My dad would say they were just being nice cause he was a single guy raising 3 kids by himself. My aunt picked me up from school sick and we head home. She must have known what was up and had me wait in the car. Both of my friends' moms came out half-dressed and shit with my aunt yelling at my dad. I never did tell out of fear. One mom was divorced but one wasn't and I was afraid of tearing their family apart. Will take it to my grave. 2 days in a row when I was in the 2nd grade I pissed my pants, because the teacher had this policy where she wouldn't let any student go to the bathroom even during free time in class. The 3rd time I spent a solid 10 minutes begging her before she finally said fine. I pissed my pants on the way to the bathroom. My family only knows of the one time but I had to deal with that humiliation 2 times before and it was within the first week at school. After that I had a water bottle that I pissed in during her class for the remainder of the year. I don't know what she was expecting if somebody who just moved in with 0 friends would be doing in the bathroom. But honestly if I would have the opportunity to go back in time I would rather tell my own self to piss on her desk because that would have been less humiliating than pissing my pants 3 days in a row. I had to turn off notifications on Reddit because this blew up beyond what I expected. It seriously got to the point where I was having a hard time going to sleep before work because my phone kept on dinging. I didn't expect me pissing my pants a few times to go viral. A teacher did this to me as well, except I was literally standing in front of whole class begging to go to the bathroom as it happened. Because we had to stand up and go to the desk to ask anything. I'm a 28-year-old guy and I still get really anxious about events where you need to ask permission to go to the bathroom, or there's an expectation that limits how often you can go. Thankfully I've learned to tell this anxiety to go fuck itself mostly. But it's still there. Fuck teachers like that. Edit. People don't seem to get this. I'm not saying it's rational that I feel anxiety about events in which I've come to understand there's an expectation of informing or asking to use the restroom. No one has ever been asked can't you wait. I'm just saying it's a response I have possibly due to what this dumb teacher put me through as a child. When I was about 8 or 9 the girl next door who was about 1-2 years older than me would always take me upstairs to teach me about sex education. She once convinced me to be naked with her in bed. Obviously nothing happened because we're young, and I wasn't old enough to understand or have feelings of that nature. But she was lying on top of me. I remember thinking it was weird. I remember she would regularly wave to me from her bedroom window whilst I was in my bedroom. She's beyond her windowsill naked. I was oblivious, not told anyone about it. It was a bit of a case of one of those events that just pass kids by. Edit. Thank you for my first ever 1,000 upvotes. During my freshman year in high school I was drinking a red Gatorade at lunch. This girl said that I was sitting in her seat. I hurried and swiped my drink to find another seat. I didn't realize my Gatorade lid wasn't tightened and the drink basically splashed all over her white pants. I scurried off pretending I basically just didn't fuck up this girl's pants with red Gatorade. A few weeks later my friend invited me over to play some league at his house. His sister came home and I realized that was the girl I spilled my drink on. On God I was shitting my pants at that very moment, but luckily she seemed to have not remembered my face because she did not mention it. My friend and I still talk to this day. I've graduated high school 9 years ago, and I have never told this to him or his sister. I sometimes feel like she pretends to not remember and is actually plotting something all these years. Edited typos that I could catch before work lol. I worked as a medical assistant in the early 90s, right out of school. At my first job, the doctor was a screamer who would yell at us in front of patients. call us names, make us work during our breaks, etc. But the worst thing he did was make us work overtime at the regular hourly rate, $6 an hour then. So one day I told the office manager, who was also the doctor's wife, that someone had called from the state wage board and said they were investigating a complaint from a former worker about non-payment of overtime. The mandatory overtime stopped her, and if we did have any, it was paid at the time-and-a-half rate. Bonus, I got to hear the doctor and wife bitch and curse about it and wonder which ex-employee did it. There was a lot of turnover, so that was fun.